You're watching This Week in Louisiana Politics with Fred Childers.
Good Sunday morning to you. I'm Fred Childers. Thanks for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics on your local election headquarters. Well, we start this morning with a controversial tax break program for businesses. It's called the Industrial Tax Exempt Program. The first time we saw changes to ITEP, as it's called, Governor John Bel Edwards gave local governments, like, say, school boards, the power to control those tax breaks. Didn't sit well with some businesses. Deon Guillory reports the governor is clarifying now the state still has some power.
The resolution as amended is adopted.
And with it, in addition to the state's controversial industrial tax exemption program known as ITEP, the way the program works is that big businesses ask for huge tax breaks in order to build a facility or move into a parish with the promise of jobs. The break must be approved by the parish school board, council, and sheriff because back in 2016, Governor John Bel Edwards took the authority out of the state's hands and gave it to local entities. Under this new addition, if an ITEP is rejected, the business can now appeal it to a state board. Edgar Cage with Together Louisiana says the program gives a voice to those on the local level.
But we see there is room now for hope for the local entities to still exercise and have their voice and their right to deny an ITEP.
The Baton Rouge Area Chamber agrees in a statement that reads in part, quote, local bodies will continue to have the authority to approve or reject applications, but not the authority to invent new rules for the program. It's those possible new rules that led to the resolution. Cage says either way, it's a slight victory.
We know we have a place at the table and a place in this process, and we will always be there to protect the interests of our citizens in Louisiana.
For your local election headquarters, I'm Deon Guillory.
And while some business leaders and proponents of ITEP are celebrating the change, the governor says hold your applause for now because he anticipates the vast majority of appeals will not be entertained by the state. Well, Governor John Bel Edwards has created a study group designed to help identify and respond to the decline in the state's rural communities. Populations in Louisiana's rural areas have dwindled due to problems with job creation, infrastructure, and education systems. The governor's former chief of staff, Ben Nevers, will serve as the chairman of the advisory council. A strategic plan is due by January 2021. East Baton Rouge Mayor President Sharon Weston Broome is looking into a parish-wide initiative to improve communication in the event of a threat to the community. The announcement comes after a public hearing about a blaze at the Exxon Mobil refinery last week. The mayor joined other city, state, and industry leaders at a town hall meeting where residents were able to voice their concerns over the handling of last week's fire. The most talked about issue was lack of communication from officials. People living around the plant say an alert about the incident was delayed and only sent to select people. Exxon says they simply followed protocol and sent alerts based on the chain of command.
They get to define what's an actual threat. For us regular citizens, man, if there's a fire at a chemical plant or a processing plant, you may think it's fine because it's under control, but as regular citizens, if one thing goes wrong, we are now that many minutes behind schedule in terms of protecting ourselves.
7 days, why are we waiting 7 days? Why not 3? I mean, and if we do the monitoring, we don't need any days because we're going to know what's happening in real time.
Exxon expects to release a more detailed report on the fire in the next 60 days. We'll, of course, bring that to you. Well, time is running out for Louisiana residents who want to vote in the upcoming presidential primary. The primary isn't until early April, but the deadline to register to vote or update your voter registration is March 4th. Now, the presidential preference primary is the only Louisiana election closed to members of a certain party. To see how you can register, visit our website. That's brproud.com, or you can download our free BR Proud smartphone app. And speaking of the presidential primary, this week's Democratic presidential debate in Las Vegas turned into a political slugfest, the most contentious yet, with one clear target. NBC's Tracy Potts has a recap of the latest debate.
We'll have Donald Trump for another 4 years.
It took less than 5 minutes. Senator Elizabeth Warren threw the first punch.
A billionaire who calls women fat broads and horse-faced lesbians. And no, I'm not talking about Donald Trump. I'm talking about Mayor Bloomberg.
Billionaire Michael Bloomberg on defense all night, challenged to explain his stop and frisk policy that targeted people of color.
It got out of control.
It's not whether he apologized or not, it's the policy. The policy was abhorrent.
They urged him to release tax returns, Bloomberg says they're on the way, and change the tax code so the rich pay more.
Why are you complaining? Who wrote the code?
You did. You and your campaign. You and your camp, not me. You and your campaign contributions electing people who represent the wealthy and the powerful.
Warren went after Bloomberg on female employees who sued, alleging a hostile work environment.
Mr. Mayor, are you willing to release all of those women from those non-disclosure agreements so we can hear their side of the story?
They signed those agreements, and we'll live with it.
Pete Buttigieg went after Senator Amy Klobuchar for forgetting the name of Mexico's president.
Are you trying to say that I'm dumb, or are you mocking me here, Pete?
I'm saying that you shouldn't trivialize
I made an error. You have not been in the arena doing that work. You've memorized a bunch of talking points.
You don't have to be in Washington to matter.
They all want to be in Washington, but getting there is getting tough.
Well, this week, U.S. Senator Bill Cassidy announced his re-election campaign, and there for that announcement was Harrison Golden. Harrison, I imagine, like most candidates for the office that he now holds, he's probably listing all of his accomplishments first, right?
Many of those accomplishments, Fred, in his words, coming through the sector of healthcare. Of course, no surprise there. Dr. Cassidy, a gastroenterologist by trade, being in the Senate since 2015, now campaigning for term number 2. Those list of accomplishments, as we were talking about here, really focusing on healthcare, the legislation to curb surprise medical billing, reducing costs of prescription drugs and paid family leave, in addition to some child care tax credits. And of course, Dr. Cassidy, Senator Cassidy, you may recall, first reached that level of national attention with his push to repeal the Affordable Care Act, or create a replacement for it at least. So this has been a sector where the senator has been really trying to make a niche for himself on Capitol Hill. In his words, he has done just that.
Right. Does he have any challengers?
At this point, he has a few. Democrat Antoine Pierce, as a community activist from Baton Rouge, most recently served as Mayor President Sharon Weston-Broom's transition aide here in the city of Baton Rouge, and he's campaigning, in his words, on universal health care. So really trying to play Senator Cassidy at his own game here. Some independent candidates as well in this ongoing race. But at this point, the Democratic challenger here really trying to make a name for himself, also in the realm of healthcare.
And I think I've already seen an email from the Louisiana Democrats challenging the senator on his record.
Yeah, I want to read that statement to you right here. Stephen Handwerk, the executive director of the Democratic Party in Louisiana, saying, quote, "Bill Cassidy has broken every promise he made to everyday Louisianians. He spent his time in Congress supporting an all-out attack to rip health care away from millions of Americans and end pre-existing conditions protections." That's just a part of that statement there. Senator Cassidy here talking about his goal to protect those with pre-existing conditions all the way through. So, you know, to be expected here, never too early in the realm of politics and election season. So here we go.
Yeah, he is getting started early. I know you'll follow that campaign and the others very closely. We'll watch it as well. Thank you, Harrison.
Thank you for that.
All right, well, coming up, another effort is underway to do away with Louisiana's death penalty. Coming up, I'll talk to the author of that bill that's already pre-filed and the groundswell of support. You might be surprised where that support is coming from. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to This Week in Louisiana Politics on your local election headquarters. We're going to discuss Louisiana's death penalty, and we're going to talk to a man who wants to do away with the death penalty. That is Representative Kyle Green, Jr., a Democrat from MARRERO, Louisiana. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. So you want to do away with the death penalty. You have pre-filed a bill, House Bill 38. Tell me about that effort. Why do you want to do that?
Well, it's something that's near and dear to my heart as a practicing attorney. You know, I've seen over, the span of many, many years where you've had individuals who were sentenced to death, but later found out to be innocent of the crime that they were accused of committing. They were exonerated, and on top of that, the cost of it is extremely expensive to convict someone, then to finally execute them because of the legal costs and the constitutional mandated appeals that are automatic once a person is convicted of capital punishment. Then probably the most equally important is that this state has reaffirmed its position as being a pro-life state time and time again through elections. And for me, I think that we need to really look at ourselves and our values and ask ourselves the hard question: are we being consistent with the pro-life values that we've continued to espouse? And for me, I don't see how those, the issue of being pro-life but being for the death penalty are consistent with one another. So that is the spirit or the reason why I'm bringing this bill. Yeah, I think it's overdue, especially when you look at the country as a whole. States just aren't executing anyone nowadays. I think
Louisiana hasn't executed anyone since 2010.
We have not, and I think that person voluntarily decided to be executed. I think the public sentiment is changing towards the death penalty. Then, we've seen this used to be a Democratic issue, but now you're starting to see more individuals on, the more conservative side coming on board.
Absolutely, and I wanted to talk to you about that as well. In fact, we have seen this effort play out in the legislature a couple years ago. Baton Rouge Republican Dan Claytor, and he joined New Iberia Democrat Terry Landry. They both had a bipartisan effort to abolish the death penalty. It made it a lot farther than I thought it would in the legislature, but ultimately failed. What's different this time?
Well, actually, former Senator Claytor's bill failed, I think, in House committee, but Colonel Landry's bill actually made it out of committee, but he didn't bring it up for a vote.
They deferred it.
Right. He chose to withdraw from the calendar after a lengthy debate, very emotionally driven debate.
It was lengthy and very emotional. I was there for that.
And I haven't talked to him, to find out why it happened, and I'll do that in the coming weeks. But my suspect was that there may not have been the necessary votes to do it, to pass it. His bill was a constitutional amendment, which would have required 70 votes in the House to pass. My bill is different. It's strictly statutory. So you need a simple majority of 53 votes in the House and 20 votes in the Senate. Then it goes to the governor for his signature, and we will statutorily, repeal the death penalty off the books.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's definitely a different take on it. You had mentioned Republicans' support of this, and I was fascinated to watch the legislature deal with these bills, and I was fascinated to see how many Republicans signed on. Typically, Republicans, conservative Republicans, would be your main challenger to abolish the death penalty. That's just not so anymore. In fact, I want to read you just a few names that I came up with researching this subject. And while covering the legislature, these are Republicans, very conservative Republicans, who would sign on to this. We have E. King Alexander, he's the GOP Executive Committee. His reasoning was it's not economically efficient, and you're gonna hear a lot of that from Republicans. And you also have Eddie Rispone, major, very staunch conservative Republican candidate for governor. He stood up on the debate stage and said in front of his Republican supporters, I don't support the death penalty. He cited his Catholic faith for religious reasons. Then you have retired Air Force Colonel Rob Maness, a Republican candidate for U.S. Senate. I found his comment the most interesting. He said that he's reportedly said that he doesn't believe the government is capable of administering capital punishment. So here, there's a long list of Republicans here who will cite inefficiencies and too many expenses involved.
It is. It's expensive. The last research I did during law school, I did a paper on the death penalty, and through my research, I found that it could cost to execute someone almost $2 million. When you account for all the legal fees and the challenges that go up until the moment a person's executed. as a whole, the system, I read a report where, you know, the system, anyone who's, the people who we're going to sentence to death from August 1st of 2019 for the next 18 years, it's going to cost the state over around $300 million. That's $300 million that can go to other areas of the state budget that is needed when you talk about, you know, early childhood education or giving teachers a pay raise or funding the much needed expenditures we need to, you know, take care of our roads and bridges.
Now, proponents of the death penalty will often cite the victims' families in this case. What would you say to a homicide victim's family member who sees the death penalty as the only just punishment for such a depraved act of killing someone?
I don't think that there's anything I could say or do that would take away the pain that they're feeling, you know, from losing their loved one. I would be very honest with them and tell them that, you know, the process that we have is not going to give them any more or less sense of closure, because you have situations where people have sat on death row for more than 20 years. You know, and I do think that, I'm just an eternal optimist, I do think that, you know, an individual who can have created or have committed such a heinous act can still lead a life that is beneficial to society, even from behind the bars within a jail cell. There's still a chance, and can add value to society. You know, and then, you know, we go back earlier to where the people who are committed or convicted is not necessarily certain that they were actually the perpetrators of the crime in which they were accused of.
So with that always there, that possibility always there, you're going to be against the death penalty?
I am. You know, you can have 10 people on death row, and me personally, you know, if there's one life that's worth saving who didn't actually commit the crime that they were accused of committing, and as a byproduct of that, all the other 9 guilty individuals, their lives are spared, I think that's worth it.
Right. All right. Well, we're running out of time. Representative Kyle Green, Democrat from MARRERO, thank you so much for coming on the show. I should also congratulate you because you just won election to this seat. And I think you have an uphill battle in the legislature, but it's going to be interesting to watch.
I do. I look forward to it. You know, when I told the voters when I ran for office, this is something that I would hit the ground running, and that's what I'm trying to do. And to tackle the tough issues. You know, hard things are hard. You know, and but we can't deal with it unless we actually tackle them. So, thank you so much.
Thank you. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back. Louisiana drivers say the costs of staying covered are crippling, but state lawmakers hope to hit the brakes on high auto insurance rates this spring. Harrison Golden tells us how.
Yeah, it's rather on the expensive side here because, I don't know, I think a lot of Nimrods drive around here.
There's a lot of cutting people off and all kinds of stuff.
We asked drivers at one Baton Rouge gas station why they think Louisianians are paying so much for car insurance. $2,300 a year on average, the second highest rate in the country.
People up top just need to lower insurance because everybody's got to have it.
And while ideas vary on how to lower rates, those we met agree the time for a fix is now.
The most important thing in politics ain't really money, and it's not name recognition, it's not even endorsements. What it is timing.
State Insurance Commissioner Jim Donnellan tells the Baton Rouge Press Club he's backing a few bills in the upcoming legislative session, namely one by Republican Representative Ray Garofalo that would put more car crash cases before juries, lowering the state's highest in the nation threshold. Supporters say this would limit lawsuits and save insurers money that would otherwise fall onto the driver's lap.
If we do the 5 bills that I clicked off, we will see relief in 24 months. No question about it.
But personal injury attorneys and other opponents question whether changing the legal system will lower those rates.
It'll make insurance companies a little more money, but it's not going to help you and me.
Eric HOLL leads Real Reform Louisiana and says the best fix lies in 4 bills this year from Democratic Senator Jay Luno. They would stop companies from basing rates on credit scores, gender, marital status, or military deployment.
They're never going to tell you up front that they're charging you more because you're a widow or because you're a blue-collar worker. They're just going to give you the rate they get, and the other insurance companies are doing the same thing.
Lawmakers will take up the matter when they return to the Capitol March 9th after winning their seats on promises that they would lower rates one way or the other. Harrison Golden for your local election headquarters.
Thank you for joining us for This Week in Louisiana Politics. I'm Fred Childers. I'll see you next Sunday right here on your local election headquarters.